If you have pasta, fat cloves of garlic, extra virgin olive oil, capers, Kalamata olives, red pepper flakes, tins of tomatoes, and of course awesome oily anchovies, you have the makings for pasta puttanesca. In this easy and delicious recipe, anchovies are the star of the show. I know I'm going to say anchovy, and some people will hear the word and feign disdain. Probably a subpar pizza or a bad Caesar salad, and that is such a shame because anchovies are really magical. Although they are small in size, they are huge on flavor, and they absolutely deserve a spot in your pantry. And I'll tell you why. But first, if you're just here for the recipe, that's perfectly fine. You can click on the timestamp in the description below, and it'll take you right to the recipe. And while you're here, let me know your thoughts on anchovies. Do they deserve a spot in your pantry, or are they a hard pass? Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, anchovies are really big on flavor, but when they're fresh out of the sea, they're actually quite mild. It's not until you salt cure them and pack them in oil that they get this really big, intense flavor. And that's another reason I say they're magical, because once you put them in your sauce or your stew, they almost instantly break down and they give it this really meaty complexity that makes your sauce taste as if it's been stewing for hours. Now, if you're new to cooking with anchovies, you will find them in the supermarket packed into little tins or glass jars. Most likely you'll find them in tins. As to which is better, it's absolutely a personal preference. Some anchovy enthusiasts, and yes, there are many, swear that the tins are the best, and they say that because they're packed flat and it protects the integrity of the fillet. And of course, others are going to swear the jars are the best. I personally like Marrow and Ortiz, both which come from a jar, but it's absolutely a personal preference. But no matter which way you go, you just want to make sure you store them properly because anchovies are really sensitive to heat. They have to be stored in a cool, dry pantry. And once they're open, should you have any leftovers, then you just need to store them properly too. If you're eating them from a jar, you can just keep them in that jar, pour some olive oil over them, make sure they're submerged, put the lid on, and refrigerate them. Very easy. If they're in a tin, you'll just put them in a glass jar or something that has a lid, put a little olive oil in them, again, keep them submerged, put the lid on, and pop them in the refrigerator. Either way, they'll both keep in there for about 2 months. And now that we have talked about anchovies, we can move on to our pasta puttanesca. Now, if you're of a certain age, you probably can't hear pasta puttanesca and not think of lemony snickets and a series of unfortunate events. In the movie, the Baudelaire children claim that pasta puttanesca means very few ingredients. However, the Oxford English Dictionary suggests that puttanesca means relating to prostitution. So, you may be wondering, how did this tasty Italian dish become associated with ladies of the night? I had the same question and I did a little research. Here's what I found out. One belief is that prostitutes would make this quick and easy dish for themselves between appointments as to not interrupt their business. And that sounds plausible. The other one is it smelled so good it would just lure people in from the street. And if you've ever smelled it cooking, that is also a plausible story. There is one area in which the Baudelaire children were correct, and that is there are very few ingredients in this dish. And because there are very few ingredients in this dish, you want to use the best ones you possibly can because there is no place for inferior ingredients to hide. So we'll want to start by thinly slicing 6 cloves of garlic. You want it to be really thin because it increases the flavor of the garlic. Now, I've heard some people say it should be so thin that it's almost translucent, but I have never found this to be necessary. Then you need a half a cup of Kalamata olives, that's 65 grams. As for the anchovies, you want to drain off as much of the oil as possible and give 6 fillets a really rough chop. And finally, roughly chop 1 tablespoon of fresh oregano. If you don't have fresh oregano, you can use 1 tablespoon of freeze-dried oregano. So now we're going to add a 1/4 cup of olive oil or 60 milliliters to a large saucepan. Just heat the oil over medium-low and then add your garlic. Saute that for about 1 minute and keep that garlic moving because if you don't, it will burn, and burnt garlic is one of the worst things in the world and you don't want it in your food. Once the garlic starts to smell fragrant, we'll add 1 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. That's 830 mLs. Then we'll follow the tomatoes with olives and anchovies and 3 tablespoons of capers. Make sure you drain off as much of the caper liquid as you can, and finally add 1 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Turn the heat to a medium-high and cook for about 8 to 10 minutes. And what we're looking for here is just a thick sauce that's thick enough to coat the back of the spoon. And while the sauce is cooking, we're going to go ahead and make our pasta. For this dish, I'm going to use dried, not fresh, and that is because we want an al dente quality to it that you can really only get from dried pasta. In a large pot, we're going to add water and a really good amount of salt. And that is the secret to great tasting pasta. You want to add enough salt in there that it tastes like the sea. Once the water is boiling, add 1 pound or 450 grams of pasta and cook it until it's just slightly firmer than what you think you would normally eat. And the reason that we're doing this is we want the pasta to finish cooking in our sauce. So once the pasta is done cooking, just drain it and add it to the pan of sauce. Give it a really good mix and turn it down to a medium-low. Give it one more good mix and let it sit for 2 minutes to finish cooking in the sauce. And now we're ready to plate. And the easy way to do this that looks really impressive is to twist the pasta with some tongs or a large carving fork and simply place it in your bowl. Then top it off with as much Parmesan as your heart desires. And of course, we can't forget the wine. I think a Barbera wine works really well with this dish. Barbera is a red wine that's really fruit forward and is high in acidity. It comes from the Piedmont region. It is a wine that most locals will drink with dinner. It's cheap and cheerful, which makes it a great wine. But why it works so well with this dish is because we have all of these salty ingredients in the dish, and the salinity really holds up to the high acidity, and it just gives you a wonderful flavor. And that would be the wine I would choose to go with this dish. And there you have it. Let me know what you think. And if you're someone like me that loves to exploit everyday items from the pantry, don't forget to subscribe. Just hit the bell below so you don't miss a thing. Until next time.